The card declined at the gas pump 3 days after we buried him. It was my father's card, the one for the house, and I hadn't touched it in weeks. I didn't know yet that the house behind that card wasn't his anymore and hadn't been for months. My name's Layla Harris. I'm 34. I work dispatch for a trucking outfit 2 towns over from the one I grew up in, which is a joke my dad used to make, actually, because he ran his own shop for 26 years, and here I am telling other people's drivers where to be and when, instead of turning a wrench myself. I used to correct people when they assumed I was a mechanic like him. I'd say, no, I just tell the mechanics where to go. He thought that was hilarious, said I inherited his mouth and none of his patience for engines. That's the kind of thing I think about now that I didn't used to have room for. Small stuff, not the big stuff. The big stuff I still can't hold very long. 6 days after the funeral, my father's house, the one I grew up in, the one with the carport he built with his own hands the summer I turned 9, closed escrow, sold, gone, to a couple from 3 counties over who I will never meet and who did absolutely nothing wrong except buy a house from a woman who did not have the right to sell it. I found out from a neighbor, not from anyone in my family. A moving truck in the driveway. My stepmother's numbers already changed on the mailbox. That's where this starts. But it isn't where it starts, really. It starts a long time before that, in a kitchen that doesn't exist anymore, with a woman who was very good at smiling while she took things. I should back up. My dad's name was Walt Harris. He grew outside a little town called Bellhaven, which is one of those places where everybody's related to everybody else by the third handshake. And he ran Harris Auto Repair on Route 9 from the time he was 24 until the arthritis in his hands finally won. My mom died when I was 11. Cancer. Fast. The kind that doesn't give you time to say the right things. And it was just me and him for a long stretch after that. He came home smelling like brake cleaner and cigarettes he thought I didn't know about, and we'd eat whatever came out of a can. And some nights that was the whole day, and it was still a good day. He wasn't a soft man. He didn't say I love you the way people do in movies. He said it by fixing my car before I asked him to. He said it by keeping a photo of my mother taped inside his toolbox lid, where nobody but him and me ever saw it. He married Denise when I was 28. I want to be fair here, because fair matters to me, so I'll say it plain. I didn't hate her on sight. I actually thought, good, he shouldn't be alone in that house. She was a hairdresser 2 towns over, widowed herself, had a grown son named Tyler who worked odd construction jobs and always seemed to be between one thing and another. She brought casseroles. She laughed at my dad's terrible jokes like they were new every time. For about a year, I thought I'd gotten lucky. Then small things started. The kind of small you don't mention out loud because you sound petty saying them. She redid the kitchen. His kitchen. My mother's kitchen before that. And somewhere in the redo, that toolbox with the taped photo ended up in the shed for space, she said. My name came off the emergency contact card on his fridge, replaced with hers, which, fine, she's his wife. But then it came off the will. I only know that because Tyler let it slip at Thanksgiving and got a look from his mother that shut him up so fast his fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I didn't fight it. That's the part I still turn over. I didn't fight it because fighting felt like admitting I thought my father's love was something you had to defend, and some stubborn part of me wanted to believe it wasn't. So I called less. She was always just stepping into the shower or he's resting when I did. 6 years went by like that. 6 years of him getting smaller on the other end of the phone and me telling myself that was normal. That was just what fathers did as they aged, instead of what it actually was, which was a woman slowly closing a door with me on the outside of it. I want to tell you the exact day it broke, because I remember the smell of it. Cut grass, a mower running 2 yards over, more than I remember what anybody said. It was March. My dad had been sick 8 months by then, pancreatic, the kind of sick where the doctors use the word manage instead of cure. I drove up on a Sunday he'd actually asked me to come, which by then was rare enough that I left work early without asking. Denise met me at the door instead of letting me in, said he was napping, said it in a voice that had a little too much rehearsal in it. I sit on that porch, the porch he built the same summer as the carport, and through the front window I could see him, awake, sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of him, and a pen in his fingers that his fingers weren't gripping anymore, not since the arthritis, not since the chemo made the tremor worse. Denise saw me looking. She stepped half in front of the window like that would help. "He's not up for visitors today, Layla," she said. And through the glass, my father lifted his head, foggy, medicated slow, and mouthed something I couldn't make out. I like to think it was my name. I'll never know for sure, and that not knowing is a stone I carry around now. I didn't push past her. I want to tell you I did, that I'm the kind of daughter who kicks doors down, but I'm not. Not that day. I said okay. I said tell him I love him. I got back in my car and I sat in the driveway for 11 minutes before I could make my hands work the wheel. What I didn't know that Sunday, what I wouldn't know for months, was that the papers on that table were a quitclaim deed, transferring the house, my father's house, the one paid off free and clear in 2003, entirely into Denise's name. That's the object I want you to remember. Not the deed itself, not yet. I didn't have it in my hands for a long time. What I want you to remember is a folder. A plain green folder I started keeping in my glove box that spring, without even really deciding to. Every voicemail my dad left me from then on, I saved instead of deleting. Every text, every photo of a receipt or a bill Denise let slip past her when we talked. I didn't know yet what it would become. I just knew, somewhere underneath the part of me still trying to believe the best, that I should keep it. My father died on a Tuesday in September. I was there for that, at least. I want that on the record. I was there, holding a hand that built a business out of nothing. And Denise was there too, and Tyler. And for about 4 hours in that hospital room, none of us were fighting about anything. Grief does that sometimes, flattens everybody onto the same floor for a little while. The funeral was that Saturday. Bellhaven Baptist, the same church he married my mother in 39 years earlier. I gave a eulogy I'd written at 2 a.m. at my kitchen table, crossing out every sentence that sounded too much like a speech and not enough like him. I told the story about the toolbox and the taped photo. Half the room was crying. Denise sat in the front pew in black with her hand pressed to her mouth, and I remembered thinking, at least we have this in common. At least we both loved him. I did not know, sitting in that pew myself, 3 rows back because somehow I wasn't front row family anymore, that the house I grew up in already had a for sale sign leaning against the inside of the garage, waiting for the flowers to clear off the lawn before it went up. I did not know there was already a buyer. I did not know the closing was scheduled for the following Friday, 6 days out, because Denise had put the house on the market a full month before he died, while he was still breathing in that back room, banking, I have to assume, on the fact that grief makes people slow, and slow people don't check public records. She forgot one thing about me, though, and it's a small thing, almost funny if it weren't so ugly. She forgot what I do for a living. I spend 40 hours a week tracking things down. Trucks, drivers, freight, paperwork that doesn't add up on somebody's manifest. Finding out where something actually is and when and who signed off on it isn't a skill I have to try very hard to use. It's just Tuesday. The gas card declined on a Thursday. By Friday morning, I was sitting in my car outside the county recorder's office 40 minutes before it opened, green folder on the passenger seat, waiting to find out exactly what my stepmother thought she'd gotten away with, and exactly how far back it went. I want to pause here and tell you something I actually learned that week, because if you're ever the one sitting outside a county office with a bad feeling in your chest, this might save you some grief. Property records in almost every county are public. You don't need a lawyer to walk in and pull a deed. You give them the address, sometimes just the owner's name, and a clerk hands you a copy of exactly who signed what and when and in front of which notary. It costs a few dollars a page. Nobody has to grant you permission. I didn't know that until that Friday morning. I know it now, and so do you. What that deed showed me was a date. February. A month I remembered clearly because it was the same month my father was 3 weeks into a chemo cycle that had him sleeping 18 hours a day. The same month his oncologist's own notes, which I would get my hands on soon enough, described him as intermittently oriented. The signature on that deed didn't even look like his. Not really. Not once you'd spent 34 years watching him sign report cards and repair invoices and birthday cards. I sat in my car in that parking lot with a certified copy in my lap, and for the first time since March, I didn't feel like crying. I felt something quieter than that, something closer to still water. That's the last thing I'll tell you for now. Because what came after, the notary I found, the phone call I made that I recorded without apology, the thing my father's own oncologist told me without even realizing what she was handing me, that's a longer story, and I want to tell it right. I'll just say this much. By the time my stepmother sat down to that closing table, thinking a dead man's daughter was too busy grieving to notice, I already knew things she had no idea I knew. And I was done being the one standing on the porch, looking in through the glass. The oncologist's office called me back on a Tuesday, and I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number. And by then, I'd stopped answering anything I didn't recognize. But something made me pick up. Her name was Dr. Anika Reyes. She couldn't tell me much, she said, HIPAA and all that. My father being gone didn't erase every rule. But she could confirm one thing because it was already sitting plain as day in his own chart, the kind of note a doctor writes for herself, not for a lawsuit. February 14th, the day the deed was signed. His chart from that exact date read, in her own dictated words, patient intermittently oriented, drowsy, difficulty with fine motor tasks, wife present, declines additional visitors. Declines additional visitors on Valentine's Day in his own house. I sat with that for a minute after we hung up, not crying, just sitting. Then I did the other thing, the thing dispatch work actually trained me for, which is you don't trust a document, you trust the person who's supposed to be standing behind it. The deed had a notary stamp on it, a name, a commission number. Took me 4 minutes on my state Secretary of State website to look up that commission number and confirm the notary was real, licensed, active. Took me 1 phone call to her actual office to find out something Denise clearly hadn't planned on anybody checking. The notary, a woman named Carol Winsett, who ran a little shipping and notary place off Route 12, had been on a scheduled medical leave the entire second week of February. Hip surgery. She had the surgical records to prove where her hands actually were that day, and it wasn't on a pen a dying man never held. I didn't call Denise. I didn't text her. I went quiet, the way I go quiet when something in me has already decided what's about to happen and just needs the rest of me to catch up. I printed everything. The deed, the oncology note, Carol Winsett's confirmation in writing that she'd never met my father, never notarized that signature, and would say so to anyone who asked. I put it all in the green folder, behind the voicemails, behind the receipts, and for the first time since March, that folder felt less like grief and more like a loaded thing. Anyway, that's not a word I like using about my own life, but that's the word that kept showing up in my head. I told exactly one person, Tyler. I want to say something about Tyler here because I spent a long time assuming he was cut from the same cloth as his mother, and I was wrong. And it cost me some years I could have had a person on my side. Tyler had been quiet through most of this. Construction work keeps you tired in a way that doesn't leave much room for family politics. But he'd also been the one who let the will slip that Thanksgiving, the one who still texted me on my birthday every year, even after his mother stopped inviting me to the one who, when I finally called him that week and asked if we could talk, just said, "Yeah, where?" We sat in his truck outside the shop, the old Harris auto repair lot. Closed now, but not sold yet. Weeds coming up through the cracks where the tow trucks used to idle. I laid it out for him, all of it. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he sat there a long minute with his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter, and then he said, She told me the house sale was already settled before the funeral. I thought she meant paperwork. I didn't think she meant she'd already sold it. He didn't defend her. That's the thing I want you to understand about him. He just went quiet like I had, and then he said, "There's a thing Sunday. She's doing I don't even know what to call it, a gathering at the shop. Says it's to divide up Dad's tools among family before the lot sells." He caught himself on Dad. My dad had been his stepfather all of 11 months longer than he'd known him well, and even Tyler flinched a little saying it. "She's telling people it's a memorial thing. I think it's really her closing the book before anybody looks too close." I didn't sleep much that week. Not from dread exactly, more like the night before a long shift you've actually prepared for, where your body knows there's nothing left to do but show up. I printed 3 copies of everything. I called Carol Winsett back and asked plainly if she'd be willing to confirm what she told me over the phone, if it came to that. She said, and I remember this exactly, "Honey, nobody puts my name on something I didn't do. Call me whenever you need to." I saved her direct line in my phone under a name I won't repeat here because it still makes me laugh a little, and laughing a little is sometimes the only thing keeping the rest of you upright. Sunday came in gray and a little too warm for October. The shop lot had maybe 15 people in it by the time I pulled in. Cousins, an old mechanic named Ruben who'd worked under my dad for 19 years, Tyler's girlfriend, a couple of neighbors Denise had apparently decided counted as family now. Folding tables were set up with what was left of my father's life on them. Wrenches, a drill press, that green metal toolbox, lid closed, sitting off to the side like nobody quite knew what to do with it. Denise stood at the head of it all in a cream-colored blazer, looking like a realtor at an open house instead of a widow at a memorial. She hugged me when I walked up. I let her. I've gotten good at letting people do things while I wait for my moment. She started talking maybe 20 minutes in, once most people had a plate of the little sandwiches somebody's aunt had brought. Said some words about Walt, about legacy, about how the proceeds from the house, she used the word proceeds in front of everyone like it was a business transaction and not my childhood home, would be used to honor his memory properly. She didn't say how. She didn't say a number. She said it with her chin up and her hand resting on the edge of that toolbox like it belonged to her now too. That's the trigger, the entitled demand. She stood there in front of 15 witnesses on the same ground where he taught half of them how to change their own oil, and she claimed the last of him like a closing statement. I let her finish. I want that on record too. I didn't cut her off. I waited until she was done, until the little ripple of polite nodding had settled, and then I said, not loud, not shaking, "Can I see the closing paperwork on the house, since we're talking about proceeds?" She smiled the way she used to smile at my dad's jokes. "Layla, this really isn't the time." February 14th, I said. "That's the date on the deed transferring the house into your name alone. Dad was 3 weeks into chemo. His oncologist's own chart from that day said he was drowsy and intermittently oriented and that you declined additional visitors." I pulled the copy out of the folder and set it on the table, next to the sandwiches, next to his tools. I have that in writing. That's the public snag. I watched it land on her face, that first flicker, but she caught it fast, the way people who've practiced composure their whole lives catch it. She laughed, short and a little too high. "He was having a good day. People have good days during chemo, Layla. You'd know that if you'd bothered to visit more." Fair enough hit. I'll give her that one. It landed. I felt it land. But I didn't flinch off my line because I wasn't finished. And this is the part where I need you to understand I wasn't angry anymore. Not the hot kind of angry. I was somewhere past that. Still water. I said, "There's a notary stamp on the deed. Carol Winsett, licensed notary, office on Route 12. I had her number already dialed. I set the phone down on the table, on speaker, in front of Ruben and the cousins and Tyler's girlfriend and a neighbor holding a paper plate that had gone forgotten in her hand. I called her this week. I thought maybe you'd want to hear this too." It rang twice. Carol picked up, sounding exactly like a woman who ships packages and notarizes documents for a living. Unbothered, a little brisk. "When's that shipping and notary?" "Hi, Carol. It's Layla Harris. I've got some folks here who'd love to hear what you told me on Tuesday, if that's all right." "Sure thing, hun. What do you need?" "Can you tell everyone here whether you notarized a deed for Walt Harris on February 14th of this year?" There was a pause on the line. Not long, just a beat. Just a beat, and then, clear enough that everyone at that table heard every word of it, "I did not. I was recovering from hip surgery that entire week. I've got the hospital paperwork to prove it. And I've never in my life met a Walt Harris. If somebody put my stamp on a document dated that week, that's a forged notarization, and I'll say that to a judge, same as I'm saying it to you right now." Nobody moved. I mean that literally. Ruben's plastic fork stopped an inch from his mouth. The neighbor with the paper plate just stood there with her mouth slightly open. Tyler didn't say a word, but I saw his jaw tighten, and I saw him look at his mother instead of me, which told me everything about where this landed for him. That's the total fracture. Not a scream, not a scene. A notary's flat, unbothered voice, doing to my stepmother in 20 seconds what 6 years of my own restraint couldn't. Denise's face did something I'd never seen it do before. The smile was gone. What replaced it wasn't tears, not yet. It was something closer to a woman doing arithmetic in real time and not liking the number she was landing on. She started talking fast, the way people do when the ground's gone soft under them. There's obviously been some kind of mix-up, some clerical thing. I would never. Her voice climbed, got louder, more repetitive, reaching for the same 3 words in different order. I would never. Walt knew exactly what he was signing. He wanted me to have. I didn't raise my voice to match hers. I said it quiet enough that people had to lean in a little to catch it, which I think is exactly why it landed the way it did. He mouthed my name through a window 3 weeks before he died, and you told me he wasn't up for visitors. Then you sold his house 6 days after we buried him. You don't get to stand at his tool table and tell me how to honor him. I closed the folder. I didn't leave the papers on the table for her. I'd made copies for exactly this, and I set a second full set down in front of Ruben instead, because Ruben had known my father 19 years, and I trusted him more than I trusted anybody with my last name on their mailbox that week. I picked up the toolbox, the one with a photo of my mother taped inside the lid, if it was even still there. I didn't know yet. I hadn't looked in years. It was heavier than I remembered, or maybe I was just tired in a way that made everything heavier that day. Denise said my name once, cracked, reaching for something. I didn't turn around. "This was his," I said, "not yours." And I walked to my car, and I put the toolbox in the trunk, and I drove away, and I didn't look in the rearview mirror even once, which is not a metaphor. I really didn't. I was watching the road because my hands were shaking too hard to trust myself otherwise. The consequences that followed weren't anything I orchestrated, and I want to be honest about that because I think it matters. I didn't sue her. I didn't need to. Word travels fast in a town where everybody's related by the third handshake. The buyers of the house, once they caught wind through the title company's own follow-up that the notarization was in question, brought their own lawyer into it. And that became a mess entirely between Denise and people who'd never even met me. The county opened an inquiry into the deed on its own once Carol Winsett filed a formal complaint about her stamp being used without her knowledge, which she did the following Monday without me even asking her to. Denise stopped coming to family things. Tyler still does. He drove out 4 months later with a box of my father's old service records he'd found in his mother's garage and just left them on my porch with a note that said, "Thought you should have these." And I sat on my front steps and read through 20 years of my dad's handwriting on invoice pads and cried for the first time, really cried, since the funeral. I got some of the house's value back eventually through the estate proceedings, though nowhere near what it was worth, and honestly, nowhere near what mattered anymore by that point. That part I'll be plain about. It was never really about the money. If it had been, I'd feel worse about how small the number ended up being. What I actually got back was that toolbox. I keep it in my own garage now. The photo of my mother is still taped inside the lid, a little more faded than I remember, and some nights I open it for no reason at all except to look at it. Here's the plain truth of what I learned if you're the kind of person this might actually matter to someday. If somebody starts keeping you from a family member who's sick, that's not privacy. That's a door closing, and you're allowed to knock. Public records aren't hidden from you. Deeds, notary commissions, all of it. You can check them yourself for a few dollars and an afternoon, and you don't need anybody's permission to ask a straight question of a public office. And if a signature doesn't look right, if a date doesn't sit right in your stomach, trust that stomach. Mine was right for 8 months before my head caught up to it. I don't know if I waited too long to fight back. Some nights, I think I should have kicked that door in the March I stood on the porch instead of going quiet for 6 more months. Other nights, I think the waiting is what let me build something solid enough that nobody could argue with it once I finally spoke. I still don't fully know which one's true. Maybe both. My dad used to say the only thing worth fixing right is the thing you can't just paper over. I think about that a lot now. You can paper over an engine problem for a while, make it run rough but run. Eventually, it shows itself anyway. So I'll ask you the same thing I still ask myself some nights staring at that toolbox in my garage. If you found out somebody in your family had done what she did, would you have waited 8 months to build your case quietly? Or would you have kicked that door in the first day you knew something was wrong? I honestly don't know which one I tell you to do.